Assessment in the secondary music classroom has widely varied from subjective to authentic informative. The purpose of my challenge-based research was to discover current trends on self-evaluation, motivation strategies for students at the middle school level, and tools to use for assessment. Many of my middle school orchestra students do not consistently practice their instruments. Because of this, a goal of mine is to demonstrate to students that practicing can look differently than they think it has to be, and that when done in small chunks of time, they will improve faster than not practicing at all. Most students understand that they need to practice, but they often do not know what specifically to do when practicing to help improve their performance. Through my challenge-based research project, I sought to discover how students currently assess themselves, find ways to hone their assessment skills, and access new technologies and tools to aid in practicing. When reviewing prior research on the topic of self-assessment, I found an individual whose research was quite poignant. Hewitt conducted a study of high school and middle school wind and percussion students regarding their ability to accurately self-evaluate based on melody, rhythm, technique, and articulation. In summarizing his research, he states, "If music educators truly wish for adults to become independent practitioners of music throughout their lives, then methods that help students develop self-regulation abilities, including self-evaluation, need to be incorporated into the curriculum of school music programs." This statement was an important motivator to help drive my CBR in the proper direction. Another topic that was important to my CBR was motivation. Vodder's article on Mining the Middle School Mind offered ideas on ways to reach and teach the middle school child, including consistency of rules, expectations, and novelty. He states, "The attention span of the average middle school student is 10 to 12 minutes, and there is little evidence that their brains can be trained to develop a longer span. So, direct instruction should be kept to no more than this span of time. We now know that, between the ages of 11 and 15, the brain destroys more than 20% of all previously built connections. The brain is, essentially, pruning itself. The connections and synapses are so intertwined that some of the previous skills, memories, and learning are impacted." The information I received from this article was reinforced in the Multiple Learning Theory Applications class. By giving students a variety of activities and opportunities to take risks, my students were more engaged, therefore motivated to do well in my class. This was crucial information to have when planning the activities for my CBR. In searching for assessment tools, I found Robert Marzano's book, Classroom Assessment and Grading at Work, to be a valuable resource. In the book, Marzano makes the case for transforming the assessment system within schools and districts. Assessment items and tasks are presented that are suited to measure student progress in mastering information, mental procedures, and psychomotor procedures. Through this reading, I reflected on what the best practices for assessment in my classroom might be. The target audience of this challenge research project was my two 8th grade orchestra classes, a total of 55 students who play violin, viola, cello, or bass. The challenge was to devise a rubric for self-assessment. My role in this challenge was to facilitate and guide my students through the project. The anticipated role of my students was to collaborate, create a common vocabulary to describe assessment, and discover ways to meaningfully assess themselves in musical performance. First, students completed a pre-survey that sought out their perceptions of practicing, recording themselves when practicing, and their ability to perform in class. Next, students were given a musical exercise, Accent on a Rock, and asked to examine the music. Then, students watched a video of several anonymous students playing the musical exercise. After each performance, students were asked informally about how well the student performed the piece. After viewing several good and poor performances, students were asked to create a list of important performance criterion, such as correct notes or rhythm, that should be assessed in the musical example. Students were placed into small groups and given the task to create a rubric they felt best suited the musical exercise given. Each group had to decide on the 5 most important performance criteria and assign indicators for 5-point through 1-point values. Once the rubric was decided upon by the entire class, Each student was recorded playing the musical exercise and immediately listened to their performance and assessed themselves using the common rubric. This score was referred to as a student's self-assessment score. The class then anonymously listened to and assessed their classmates' performances using their created rubric. This score was referred to as the class assessment score and was an average of each of the performance criteria. Not only did each student assess their peers, they also assessed themselves a second time, not knowing it was their performance. This assessment was also noted and referred to as the student's blind self-assessment score. Students were presented with 3 scores based on their one performance of the musical example: self-assessment score, blind self-assessment score, and the class assessment score. Students then answered reflection questions and completed the post-survey. The post-survey was intended to see if attitudes had changed about practicing and to see if students had a better perception of how they play compared to the class assessment. Although 4 of the 5 criterion on the rubric were considered to be objective by me, students were not consistent when assessing their peers. They were often influenced by other factors when evaluating a certain criteria. For example, if a student had poor tone quality, which was not a criteria on the rubric, peers would give a low score in the notes category. Likewise, if a performer had good tone quality and played correct notes and rhythms but did not play any accents, peers often gave high scores in the accent category. In the effort category, the indicators were subjective and very difficult, if not impossible, to assess orally. Therefore, effort was not a successful criteria to place on a performance rubric. As the challenge progressed, students became more involved in determining criteria and the indicators for good to poor performances. Through class discussions, students gained ownership and control for the criterion for success. Through creating a common rubric, students practiced according to their set criterion, performed the musical example, and evaluated classmates' performances as well as their own. In Phase 2 of my CBR, I used one of my 8th grade orchestra classes, a total of 30 students. The challenge students were given was twofold. First, devise a quick practice plan with a short musical excerpt, and then find a new technology tool to aid them in practicing it. The solution that students came up with directly correlated to ease of use and accessibility. Most students chose a laptop computer to aid in their practice, with some choosing built-in software and others using free online tools such as Aviary or Audacity. Students were given 15 minutes to practice on their own using their technology tool. Afterwards, students completed an online reflection of the technology that was used and its effectiveness. Phase 1 data confirmed that most students do not practice regularly, and this challenge was intended to prove to students that even short amounts of purposeful practice is more beneficial than no practice at all. In this portion of the challenge, students had to pre-plan how they would use their time to accomplish their performance goal. The solution students came up with for creating a practice plan included slowing down the tempo, playing one measure at a time, referring to the scale and the key of the excerpt to ensure they were playing correct notes, and varying the rhythm of the technical passages in order to play them more quickly. As a result of the practice plan, along with using a technology tool, students set performance goals, pre-planned how to accomplish their goal, used a tool to help them assess their success, and reflected on how to improve for the next time. Conducting this research on self-assessment has motivated me to change my focus of teaching. Prior to participating in the EMDT program at Full Sail, my instructional delivery style was very teacher-centered. Knowing that instrumental music is a very hands-on activity, I have discovered new ways to engage my students by giving them more control of their learning and exploration of material. My goal as a teacher is to empower students with the information and tools necessary to become independent and confident musicians, and I feel that I am even better prepared to do just that. Music and technology are my 2 biggest passions, and I plan on combining the 2 as much as possible in whatever work I do, whether it is in the middle school orchestra classroom or another training environment. Using skills I acquired from the classes in the EMDT program, such as digital media and education applications and game strategies and motivation, I would like to create a comprehensive interactive application directed specifically at middle school instrumental students that would include games and activities that reinforces music theory, rhythm, and music performance skills.